everyone. After receiving a huge response from our audience, we're excited to bring to you the second season of the Study Abroad Insight series. And this time we have more experts joining us to answer your questions. What other things would you look for in an application? Okay, so I'll get my degree from the US, and then what's going to be the return on investment for me? Could you tell us a little bit about, when we talk about rankings, for example, and accreditation, what is the importance and what is the difference also between those two things? How do I get an internship? Is it paid? You know, if it's not paid, what percentage of students have you seen find jobs? I'm your host, Dharma Nayak, and on behalf of IDP Education, I welcome you to the second season of the USA Study Abroad Insight series. Keep watching this space for more information, and I'll see you soon. Hi friends, today we're excited to bring to you the final episode in Season 2 of IDP's Study Abroad Insight series. My name is Dharma Nayak and I'm the Associate Director for US Client Relations with IDP Education. I'm very happy to have with me today Ms. Jenna Seises. She's the Director of International Recruitment at Southern New Hampshire University from the USA. Welcome to our show today, Jenna.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Jenna, how many years have you been with Southern New Hampshire University?
I've been at Southern New Hampshire about 3.5 years, but I've been working in this industry 9 years.
9 years, long time.
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell our audience what is it that you do exactly in your role at Southern New Hampshire?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with students from around the world to help them to understand the application process, US education, and what it's like studying at Southern New Hampshire University, and then help them through the process of applying their acceptance, and then of course moving to the US and undergoing the start of their studies.
Okay, that sounds amazing. I think a little bit of your role we get to do here in India, but you must meet a lot of different people and go to a lot of different countries during your work. So aside from India, what would you say is one of your other favorite places to be?
I think off the top of my head, I'd have to say Japan.
Okay.
It's just so wildly different from the US, so it's really interesting to get to know their culture and their history.
Okay, sounds great. So we're very excited to speak with you today and share your advice and tips with all the students and parents and others who might be watching today. So let's get started.
Okay, sounds
All
great.
Right. So Jenna, in your experience, what would you say are some of the main reasons students choose to study in the US?
Well, first of all, you've got to think about the fact that the U.S. has some of the premier academic institutions in the world.
Right.
So there's some of the most famous names, and those names come from years and years of access to amazing opportunities for research, hands-on style study, chances for students to get either involved in practical experience where they're doing internships before they graduate. So students have a wide variety to choose from in the United States as well. There's more than 4,000 institutions, so they have a chance to find one that fits them academically and socially. And then lastly, I think just the fact that these degrees are widely accepted around the world, and with such a long history, students have a chance to network with other graduates from their university, and usually they go on to very strong career paths after studying in the US.
So a lot of different reasons, a lot of very strong reasons. Now, along with that, recently there has been some maybe hesitation for students in terms of applying to the US, even though they may want to. So how would you rate the safety or perception of the US as a whole?
Well, of course, when you're talking about going to study abroad, everybody is going to worry about their own safety or their children's safety. You're in a foreign country, you might not know the culture or the rules. Of course, everywhere that you go, you're going to have to be a little bit alert,
Sure.
depending on if you're in a large city or in a rural town, and the time of day where you are, etc. But I would say in the United States that safety is one of the foremost concerns of universities. And so that's something that they put a lot of time and effort into. I don't think you'll find a university in the US that doesn't have a campus police or a campus security department that's constantly monitoring for students, doing safety alerts, checks, cameras around campus. And almost every university has a very clear connection with a local police as well. And so the thought process is there already. And so making sure that the campus is very safe and comfortable for students. In general, whether you're in a city or in a university that's in the countryside or that type of thing, will affect whether or not the safety is more or less of a concern.
Sure,
Yeah.
that makes complete sense. Now, related to that, how would you describe the quality of life in the USA for an international student? So maybe their perception is just what they've seen on TV or in movies, but how would you describe it actually being there?
Yeah, I think the US is one of the most welcoming places in the world, and that's partially just due to the fact that we are a melting pot of a society. And so you can be from any culture, any creed, any background, and you could still be an American. I mean, I'm an American, but anybody who has been there, for one generation or more can identify as an American. And so I think people who are coming from other cultures fit in just as well. And so it's an interesting experience to go from a lot of students' home countries where they're coming to the US, and then they suddenly find that they're just one of many in a completely different looking society. I think the US is extremely welcoming to international students, but especially college campuses have taken a very strong line about being welcoming. I don't know if you've heard about this campaign called You Are Welcome Here, but almost every US university is participating in making sure that international students know that they are not only welcome, but they're an integral part of the study on the campus, not only for their experience, but for the experience of the American students as well.
So Jenna, we were just talking about livability and quality of life in the USA, but could you share some insights as far as what are some factors students might use when selecting a university or college where they might want to study?
Absolutely. Well, as I said before, there's more than 4,000 universities in the US, so there's plenty to choose from. And I think to narrow down a list, students should think about whether or not they want to be in a major city, in a suburb, or maybe in a rural setting, whether they prefer to be on a cohesive campus or a campus that's a little bit more spread around a major city. And then think about the size of the university, what size classrooms they feel comfortable in. Are they looking for a research institution or an institution that's more focused on hands-on practice and career preparation? First of all, you're talking about environment, then you're talking about academic style. I think that's a good way to start narrowing it down. Then the student has to, of course, start to select institutions that fit their academic profile as well.
No, that's very true. Now, along with selecting a university, you did mention if they want to be in a large city or rural area, but could you shed a little bit more light on, what does it mean to choose a location in the US, since it's so diverse? So.
Yes, absolutely. Well, like here in India, we have our own differences between the states in the United States and regional differences as well. So students might, for example, think about a regional difference in the sector that they're planning to look for internships or jobs in, for example. So if they're looking for a service sector job or a tech sector job versus a job that might be more focused on industrial type work or a job that's focused in agriculture. So if they're thinking about their career outcome, they might choose a location based on that. But of course, we also have our stereotypes about Californians, for example, loving the beach, Southerners versus Northerners. And so maybe doing a little research into the culture of the area of the US would be helpful as well.
Okay, no, that's very good to know. Now, Jenna, part of the admissions process once a student receives an offer is a document called the I-20. So wanted to ask you if you could explain for our audience, what is an I-20? And there's a new ruling that's come into effect recently. How will that impact, students or maybe the admission process for them moving forward?
So when a student is accepted to a university in the United States, the university issues the I-20 because they've registered that acceptance with the Department of Homeland Security in the United States. That I-20 is then mailed to the student. So under these new regulations, I-20s must be mailed to the student's home. The biggest difference, I think, is that the universities are communicating a little bit more directly with the students, but at the same time, it's important that the students know right at the beginning that they put their full mailing address on their application. Yes. So we've had some I-20s that were returned back because the mailing address was not clear. So making sure that all information is given correctly up front so that the I-20 can make it to the student's home. Once they have it, they use that I-20 to go for their visa interview.
Okay. Right, and that's something very important to note, that always provide the correct information when filling out applications. Now, Jenna, when we talk about studying in the US, there are a few questions that do come up regularly, but there are some things which students may not understand. So for example, we talk about a major course of study, but there's also something called doing a minor. So, what does that mean? Is it something that anyone can do? And then related to that, say if a student applies for a computer science degree, they get there and they decide, what, this isn't probably really what I want to do. Can they change their course of study?
Okay, this is a really great question. Usually when we talk about majors and minors, we're talking about undergraduate study or bachelor degree programs. So in a bachelor degree, students can do a major focus of study. So usually that means that the student is taking at least 10 courses in the subject and they become a specialist in that subject. So I, for example, studied and my major was French when I was in university. And so then you can do a minor as well. Maybe it's something that you're interested in, or it supports your field of study, or it could be entirely different than your field of study, but something that you want to get a small focus in. So you maybe will take 5 or 6 classes in that area. It depends on the university how many courses you have to take to complete a minor. About changing your study, it really depends. Undergraduate students in the United States were quite flexible, and you can change your course of study fairly easily. So a lot of students do start in their study, they're undecided, and that's fine. We do have some general education courses where students can try some things out and see what they like and then declare a major later. So that's quite acceptable. Some students end up taking their first major and making it into a minor. No problem at all. As we go into master's degree, most students should know what they're planning to focus on before they go into their master's. That's the whole point of the master's degree, is that they're getting a higher level specialization. If the student does try to change their focus after they've started, they can. Sometimes that can add a semester or 2. It depends on the time that they change their course, of course.
So Jenna, it's great to know that there's a level of flexibility, if a student does want to change their major, but how does that flexibility apply maybe to English test scores or other standardized test scores in the admissions process? Because oftentimes students, question, do I really need to do it? Do I really need to do that test? So what would you say?
Yeah, well, so there's quite a difference between the standardized tests such as SAT, ACT, or GRE, GMAT, and an English language proficiency test. So almost every U.S. institution is going to require an English language proficiency test from international students who don't speak English as their first language. This test is compulsory, and it's just to show that you have a level of English, a minimum level of English, in order to complete your academic studies in the U.S. So in this case, yes, it's very important, and you can imagine as a student you would not want to be surrounded by a bunch of people who don't speak English in your classroom, because that would hold you back. So for those English language tests, the score doesn't matter as long as you meet the minimum requirement for the university you're applying to. When we're talking about other standardized tests such as GRE, these tests actually are tests that are supposed to determine the aptitude of the student for higher level study. So whether it's graduate study for GRE, GMAT, LSAT, etc., or bachelor level study for SAT or ACT. So depending on the institution in the United States, those tests are either required or not required. And sometimes institutions will use the scores on that test either to allow a student to make up for grades that might be a little bit lower, or a chance for a student to earn a scholarship. But this really varies institution by institution. So if a student is uncomfortable taking the test, or maybe doesn't score as well on the test as they would have liked, they might search for a test optional institution in the United States as well.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know, because students may not be aware about that. And now, once students take these tests, they've applied, they're at your institution, how do they go about finding housing? Like, what is accommodation like? Is it affordable? Do you get to choose who you live with? If you could explain a little bit about how does housing work, maybe at your campus or generally speaking?
Yes, absolutely. So as with any answer that I'll give about the United States, the answer varies widely depending on the university, unfortunately. But most universities do offer on-campus accommodation, especially for undergraduate students.
Okay.
As far as undergraduate accommodation goes, it's almost exactly like you see in the movies, except for the dormitories are a little bit smaller.
Okay.
But they're usually shared between two students of the same gender. Some universities do allow students to request, if they know, for example, that a friend is going to the same institution and they want to stay with that friend, they can make that request. But usually students are going alone and they request, I'd like to live with another messy person because I'm not very clean in my home, or I like to live with a night owl because I'm not much of a morning person.
Right.
And then they match you up based on those types of preferences. Some students, especially master's level students, are looking to live off campus. And usually near college campuses, there are plenty of apartment buildings to choose from. It's a little more, the student has to be a little bit more independent in order to look for that type of accommodation. But usually it's a little bit less expensive. So when we're talking about affordability, that varies widely depending on where the university is located. Usually that's the biggest factor in the cost of on-campus or off-campus accommodation.
Okay. Now, Jenna, you must have quite a number of Indian students at your campus. Do any students particularly stand out, or any kind of success stories you might be able to share with our audience?
Absolutely. It's hard to choose, really. Our students, because they come from so many different backgrounds, we have students from over 150 different programs. So they go on to do varied things depending on where they end up. I have one student, for example, who went on to start his own company. So he had been working for the UN for quite some time and had plenty of contacts. After doing an MBA at Southern New Hampshire University, he decided to go into business on his own, and he started a coffee import company.
Wow.
And I asked him once how he was able to do that and where he was importing his coffee from, and he said that he made some of his contacts through SNHU. For example, he was importing coffee from Indonesia, I think it was, and he did a contract with a coffee company in Indonesia, and he had an Indonesian friend from SNHU who helped him review the contract. So some of those stories are really close to home on how you can build this kind of international network and then take it to your home country, either to build your own company or to take that network and use it in a high-level job, hopefully.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So Jenna, with doing so many things and so many opportunities available at a US campus, students may fall ill, or get a little sick. So how do they handle those situations? Is health insurance something provided to them? Is it something that they should bring with them from their home countries? If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a requirement of the US government for all international students to have a certain level of healthcare coverage when they're studying in the US. Almost every US institution will provide this level of healthcare for students. It's usually included in the fees.
Okay.
So that's how it works at Southern New Hampshire University. Most students come in and take a US-based healthcare option that's offered through the university's help. If a student falls ill, of course, especially if they're coming for a 4-year program, they're bound to fall ill at some point. Almost every US university has a wellness center or healthcare center on the campus for small things, like if a student gets a cold or if they get a cut on their arm. They also often provide psychological services as well, mental health awareness or wellness. For larger concerns, students may go to an urgent care or to a hospital and use that, that health insurance that's provided through the university.
Okay, because I'm sure that's very reassuring for some of our parents listening in today.
Absolutely.
Now, can you give some other suggestions for Indian students who are planning to study abroad? What are some things that they should keep in mind, or in your experience, counseling and recruiting students, what are some things you think that they often forget that they should not forget when they're applying, or thinking about which country to study?
So do you mean personal attributes? Do you
It could be
mean
personal, things that they should, maybe work on for themselves so they can be more successful, in the academic environment. And then also, once you said maybe the first year as an undergraduate student, they're on campus, then they decide to move off campus. That can be a shocker sometimes for some students. So how would you think that they should manage those things?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is the type of study that most students experience in the US is probably not something that they've experienced in their home country. We're a very participatory kind of culture, and we also value independence and independent thinking. And so usually in the classroom, students will get a participation grade in addition to the grades on their exams and their essays and their group projects. Group projects are a key part of studying in the United States, so being able to socialize and participate as part of a group in your study is really important. Asking questions in the class, approaching your professor outside of class, these are things that really help students succeed academically in the United States. And so what I suggest to students, Indian students who are thinking about coming, is to think about how they're going to participate when they're in the classroom, and not just sit in the back quietly and hope that the teacher imparts the information to them, but to be more part of the classroom integrally in working with other students, asking questions, challenging the professor. Those types of things are really valued in our culture. As far as getting ready to move off campus, I think one of the things that a lot of international students get when they study abroad is a sense of independence. Obviously, it's a little bit of a learning curve, and there's the good parts and the bad parts about being away from home. I think both of us have probably experienced that in our lives. But that is one of the biggest tools that students get in their tool belt after going away, being on their own, and gaining that independence. So I think maybe just being ready to know that not everything is going to go perfectly, but that you're going to come out stronger and better and more independent on the other side.
Okay, no, that's very, very good advice. Now, how would you encourage students to balance, their academic life with things that they can do outside of the classroom? So, what kind of activities or opportunities are available for them beyond academics?
Yes, so university life in the U.S. is super fun. I'm not going to lie. I hope students really enjoy it. There's plenty of extracurricular activities available depending on what the student is interested in. So almost every college campus offers clubs that students can get involved in, volunteer activities, events on the campus such as concerts, fashion shows, comedy shows, stand-up mic night. So students have a chance to try out quite a few different things and really enjoy themselves. We're located about 1 hour from Boston, so a lot of our students really enjoy doing some sightseeing in the New England area. And I think a lot of students really get a chance to explore around the U.S., not just the region that they're studying in. As far as balance goes, it's even for American students, you go off to college and you're trying to find, it's kind of like how we have to find a work-life balance, right? So you want to enjoy yourself and get to know your peers and socialize and try out some fun activities and get that cultural immersion while at the same time keeping up your academics in your classroom. U.S. universities usually have strong support systems to help with that. Students get academic advisors along with faculty advisors. International students have the added benefit of usually having an international student advisor, as well as walk-in tutoring and learning centers, help with writing essays, for example, or doing certain citation styles, as well as usually universities have quite robust libraries that can give support as well when students are doing research on a certain topic. So I would just suggest that students avail themselves of those services to make sure that they're keeping up their academics while they're enjoying their lives.
Right. So a lot of support services, a lot of outreach and fun, can be had, so it's not just studying all the time.
Yes.
Although, of course, that's the main focus.
For sure.
Now, in order to engage with all of these activities, students and perhaps parents also might be worried about the finances in terms of, well, how much, will this cost? And, are scholarships available? Is financial aid available? And typically, how much is given to students? So could you help our audience understand a little bit more about, what is the difference between, say, financial aid versus scholarships? And then also within scholarships, is that something that is given, automatically, or something that they should apply for?
Yes, it is very hard to answer those questions, so I completely understand the confusion before you go to the US of how to navigate all of these processes. Every institution is a little bit different on how they approach financial aid versus scholarships, and even within scholarships, merit scholarships versus other types of scholarships like diversity scholarships. And so it really varies widely by institution. Merit scholarships are probably the most used by international students or the most received by international students. And those aren't automatic. They're based on merit, which means they're based on the student's academic background. So students who have really strong grades, really high standardized test scores, they're more likely to receive a higher merit scholarship. As far as financial aid goes, we usually think of that as something that's available to American students through governmental loans. And I think a lot of international students, Indians included, are able to get bank loans like that from their home country. But depending on the university, different types of scholarships and aid are available. It's just case by case.
It's case by case. And definitely, I think the theme has been that each university just varies because everyone is so different. And there are so many of them also.
That's exactly right.
So could a student work part-time while they're studying, and what might be an average, hourly salary they might make, and can they work off campus, or are they only allowed to work on campus?
So with a student visa in the United States, students are only allowed to work part-time and on the campus. So if we're talking about a part-time job on a campus, usually those vary, but somewhere in the minimum wage area of $8 to $10 per hour. So 20 hours per week, you're looking at pocket money, a maximum of $200 a week. It's a great experience for students to get an on-campus job. I always recommend it. They make strong ties, and they learn about office culture, university culture, maybe get a job in the library, the dining hall, etc. Master's level students can sometimes do research assistantships or teaching assistantships where they're working on the campus and they get a tuition remission for that. As far as working off campus, some students will think about before coming, oh, maybe I could, drive an Uber or something like that. Unfortunately, that's forbidden by the student visa. They do have to stay in that on-campus job.
Okay, no, that's very good to know, because some may have thought about that. So with that, students usually skip from there to, well, what will I do after I graduate? Can I work? What is my OPT eligibility? So could you talk about that, along with whether you're STEM, in a STEM course versus a non-STEM course? How does that vary and differ for a student?
Absolutely. So, so you hit the nail on the head. There's a program inside the United States called OPT, or Optional Practical Training. So when a student studies in the United States, they do get a chance to stay back after they graduate and work for 1 year in their field of study. So if they studied marketing, they'll work in marketing. If they studied engineering, they'll work in engineering. And it's a great opportunity for a student to get a full-time job, get that American experience, hopefully earn some money that they spent invested in their degree back. And students who are in STEM fields, so science, technology, engineering, and math, they do have a chance to extend that OPT to a 3-year period. So it does give them the chance to stay a little bit longer in the US. And that's simply because the US is lacking in employees in STEM fields. And so we are looking for more international talent in those areas.
So Jenna, we've talked a lot about OPT, post-study work, but in order to get to that point, what are some things students can be doing while they're studying? So could you tell us a little bit about internships, what's available, and how do maybe career services on campus assist a student?
Absolutely. So I think that's one of the things that U.S. institutions are really known for, is helping students with career preparation, whether it's built directly into the curriculum in the form of simulation learning, case studies, group projects, or if it's in the form of internships off campus that are either arranged by the university or the university helps the student to obtain through the help of career services. So almost every university in the US has a strong career services department that helps students with counseling about resume writing, cover letter writing, making sure everything is correct in the US style, and then helping them with things like the job search. Usually there's career expos on the campus where companies are coming looking for students either for internships or post-graduation jobs. And they help with things like, you know, making an elevator pitch and how to sell yourself in under 30 seconds. And they do some things like that, like workshops, and almost every university also keeps an intranet where they're posting job postings and internship postings for students as well. I always recommend to students to also liaise with their faculty members to see if they know anybody in the industry nearby that's looking for interns. So a lot of students have a chance to get real hands-on practice during their study, whether it's bachelor or master's level students, before they go looking for that job in the OPT time. Of course, universities will also help with that job search as well.
Yeah. And now, are internships paid or unpaid typically?
That totally depends. It depends on the career, it depends on the university, and it depends on the student. So it could be both.
It could be both. But the option is available either way to get some good hands-on experience while they're studying.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Great, Jenna. Now, Jenna, we've been working with you through IDP for some time now. You know, is there anything you would like to share with the audience in terms of, you know, how do we work with each other, how we can, you know, work together in terms of helping students achieve their dream to study abroad?
Absolutely. So we have been partnering with IDP for as long as I can remember, Southern New Hampshire University. And IDP is one of our premier partners here in India. We consider them like a branch of Southern New Hampshire University within India. So the counseling that IDP gives to students is almost exactly like it's coming from the mouth of the university representative. IDP also can help students with pre-departure counseling, not just on which universities to apply for, which universities match the student's academic profile, how to apply, how to be accepted, but also pre-departure things like how to prepare for a visa interview, where to fly into when going to the US, you know, logistical things that maybe students haven't thought of because it might be their first time leaving their home country. And so we consider the academic services from IDP to be some of the best that we have as partners in the world.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Jenna. Now, you have shared a lot of extensive information with us already, so we thought we'd do a fun quick fire round with you. Okay. So we'll give you about 30 seconds for each question. Are you ready?
I hope so.
Okay, all right. So first, can you tell us 3 unique things about Southern New Hampshire University?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Southern New Hampshire University has some very sought after programs. Students choose us because they get a chance to choose a field of study that's going to lead to a career path that can be highly lucrative or very sought after. So for example, engineering, computer science, IT, business, psychology, law. These are highly sought after programs that students can choose at Southern New Hampshire. As well, we have probably the nicest campus on the entire east coast of the United States. So Southern New Hampshire University has invested over $200 million in the past 5 years into renovating the campus. We have 9 new buildings, including a new library, a new athletic center, stadium, new dormitories, new student center, new career services building, and new engineering building as well. So students are using cutting edge technology in the classroom and getting a chance to be in some of the state-of-the-art facilities that really help them to achieve their study dreams, whether it has to do with coding, whether it has to do with building robots or drones, etc. You said 3 unique things, and I'm struggling in my rapid fire.
That's okay. No, that's okay. So what are some high demand programs at both the undergraduate and postgraduate level at Southern New Hampshire University?
So our undergraduate students, some of the highest demand programs are in engineering. We have a premier aeronautical engineering program as well as mechanical and electrical. And a lot of those students are doing things like robotics, telecommunications, working on unmanned aerial systems. We also have a computer science science program and an IT program that are very popular, as well as some programs in our arts and sciences school, like psychology with a focus on forensic psychology, computer information systems, business analytics on the business side, and of course, always popular is the business administration program.
Okay, and can you tell us what are some of the up-and-coming courses generally in the US? Like what's hot amongst academics these days?
Yeah, I think big data is really coming up, as well as business analytics or data analytics. Robotics has been very interesting. One of the cool programs that we have at Southern New Hampshire University is video game design and programming as well.
Okay.
So we have a big virtual reality lab on the campus where students are working on VR.
Okay, and last but not least, how is Southern New Hampshire different from other universities?
Okay, so Southern New Hampshire University is actually the fastest growing university in the United States.
Okay.
While we have a relatively small but wonderful campus in the New Hampshire area, we also have a branch of our university that offers online programs. And so together, actually, Southern New Hampshire and our academics are the largest U.S. institution in the United States, something that's quite different than a lot of other U.S. institutions.
Definitely something I didn't know also.
Yeah,
that's great. So I'm sure our audience has really benefited from listening to you today, Jenna, and tuning in. And on behalf of the whole team at IDP, we want to thank you so much for taking out the time, to be with us today here for this episode. And really, that's all from our end today. And to our audience, please do visit our website, check our social media handles. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And it's been a great pleasure hosting season 2 of the IDP Study Abroad's Insight series. Again, my name is Dharma Naik, and it's been a pleasure hosting you. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you.